Hey everyone, today we're finally back with Flesh and Blood content. This is because the Rosetta spoiler season is finally out for all of us and we have all of the cards available. And so we finally get to begin brewing all of these heroes. So I have deck lists for every single hero except for Acilio right now, and I will be covering those on the channel throughout the week. I don't claim to have these solved at all, right? We're pretty early into testing and all of that. Like, this stuff can always change. It's always how it's been. But, you know, we have a good place to start out with, right? Aurora feels pretty similar to the old Lightning Briar playstyle. So, you know, brewing up a deck with that philosophy in mind, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And so hopefully this can be a good starting point for any of you that are looking to either start testing or to begin brewing these heroes yourself. Starting with Aurora today, how does she want to play? Right? She wants to play super low to the ground, very aggressive, lots of zero costs, and then you're going to cheat go again with her ability. We do need a ratio where we're trying to get like one blue to hand per turn, so we're on a very tight blue ratio because I still think it's important for the deck. The really captivating part of this deck is setting up a 5-card hand where you bank an embodiment token, right? So you play something, and then after it resolves, when you're ending your turn, you're just going to go ahead and make an embodiment and then pass an arsenal. And then the next turn, you're going to play a bunch of stuff. And even during that turn, you can remake a second embodiment, right? Because you can reactivate Aurora on that turn. So you can get 2 lightning embodiments in one turn, which is really sick. Building out the rest of that deck, we're trying to make things as cheap as possible while also being mindful of that curve with her ability and also Starfall. So with these two together, we need a very tight blue ratio, but it is needed. For the rest of the deck, we kind of want to never pitch. We want to just play a bunch of zero cost with go again and just dump our hand at our opponent. So our equipment suite is a little lackluster considering that we had an entire new set, and currently we're not playing any of the new cards. Crown is here because with the Zen nerf, until we see what Brood is doing, there's really no reason to have Balance of Justice in your list at the moment, and also Crown lets you unbrick some of your hands, which has always been really important for Runeblade. Tunic lets us play something like Lightning Form without needing to pitch, and also can turn into a Starfall swing during a turn where you are going pitchless, so you are just playing a bunch of zero cost. Grasp is here to basically just block disruption from your opponent. It could be Quillhand. We will talk about the synergy between Arc Lightning and Quillhand, and it is of course in the sideboard for Wizard, but there is an argument for it to come in board. And then the biggest decisive part of this deck is Snapdragons versus Lightning Greaves. Now, while I think Lightning Greaves are absolutely a staple in something like Acilio, it is harder for me to sign on to them in Aurora, specifically because you don't run that many instants. You need to run enough that cards like Gone in a Flash, Flittering Charge, that these have text because they're really powerful. However, I don't think you run enough that you want to play something like Lightning Greaves that also costs 1 to use. Snapdragons, you could play out an entire 5-card hand, possibly even more, without ever needing to pitch a card while also being able to cheat go again during that turn. And when you're playing things like Snatch, Coax, and E-Strike, the ratios in this deck don't line up enough that you can always guarantee that you're going to be able to unbrick a hand or maximize the potential of it with something like Lightning Greaves. Whereas with Snaps, you are basically always realizing that value. Now, I do understand that the ceiling on Greaves is higher because you could cheat a lot of go again in one turn, right? If you play a couple instants, you could cheat a few extra action points. So I'm not denying the power of it, and it's very possible that it comes into the final version, and the final version leans more into instants, synergizing with Gone in a Flash. So entirely possible. For this list today, we're playing Snaps. So what kind of lines are you looking for? At some point during the video, I'll probably throw up some gameplay at like ×2 speed that I played just to kind of give an idea of what you're doing turn to turn. But mostly you're trying to play as much go again as possible. You have things like Entwine Lightning, Flittering Charge, Fry, Lightning Surge from Arsenal. Second Strike is really cool as well. And these are all cards that, you know, are just hitting your opponent for a bunch of damage, not costing you any resources. Burn Up plus Shock is really good too, because that just adds basically like a boom grenade from, you know, the mech fans out there. They made a boom grenade that blocks 3 and also pings 1, so that's really cool. When we go into our blues here, we also have some ways to kind of smooth out the go again with the deck, right? So we have Current Funnel, really powerful card. Blink is pretty cool actually. So Blink is in here mainly to synergize with Gone in a Flash, right? This is a blue lightning card, so that meets a few criteria, right? You could play it, basically unbreak your hand if you had a bunch of things without go again. So if you drew a hand with things like, you know, like Coax and Snatch, all this kind of stuff, it's really easy to play it out. It's an instant, so it synergizes also something like Gone in a Flash, so you could play it, Link Step, play your Blink to regain your action point, and then put the Gone in a Flash back in your hand and replay it again. And then also it's a blue, so pitching it will also keep something like Channel Lightning Valley around. And also Arc Lightning synergizes really, really well with the amount of go again that we're trying to generate from this deck. Arc Lightning can be really strong, right? Because you're splitting the damage beyond your physical attacks, which also means that if you can combine it with Channel Lightning Valley, it is like near impossible for your opponent to deny the card draw, which is really good if you're trying to go super wide. An interaction I should point out, because this is in my testing group, so I want to mention it. I have not put enough time into it to say if it's good or bad, but there is an interaction between Flicker Wisp and Arc Lightning. That's basically just going to double the damage from your Arc Lightning, so it's pretty cool as a setup between the two cards. I don't know if it's good enough to be playing, right? Because Flicker Wisp has a few problems, right? You're looking at a yellow, so not really the exact resource card that we want. That also is not a lightning card itself, and doesn't really do much outside of the Arc Lightning turn. However, those two together are very powerful. And then outside of our go again attacks, we have our chain enders basically. So that would be something like Lightning Form, although you can play Lightning Form mid combo. So don't worry about it. Everything here is super flexible. There are just pseudo, chain closers, but there are many turns where I would go Lightning Embodiment, at some point either from previous turn or from the current turn, and then play it into Lightning Form, right? So if the Lightning Form hits and you remake your embodiment, it's like it's got a 1 for 5 with go again. Or sometimes I like to play it at the end of a turn, and then put my opponent on a decision whether or not they want to deny the embodiment or not. Really cool card. It's like the only one cost I can justify being in this deck right now. Everything else is pretty hard to sign on to, but Lightning Form feels pretty strong currently. And then other cards that are pseudo chain closers, but can obviously be starters, right, with how this deck functions, are going to be things like Coax, right? Coax at the end of your turn just means that you're going to make a quicken for the next turn, right? Basically an embodiment. And then depending on if you have an arsenal or not, you can decide to blind draw a new card. Something like Snatch, same deal. And then E-Strike is kind of a chain closer. You never really want to play E-Strike for 5 go again. If you've done that, something has gone terribly wrong, but you can always do E-Strike for 5, draw a new card to put in an arsenal. You could do 7, but the average value with this deck is that the card you're going to draw is probably worth between 3 and 4. So value proposition wise, it's usually best to set up for that 5-card hand. And then also we have Static Shock. Static Shock is like the one true kind of closer. Like this is probably the last card I'm playing when it's ever in my hand. This one's pretty cool. Kind of like Lava Burst from 5 if it hits, so it's a 0 for 5, right? Pretty solid. That's about all you could ask for. So to talk about Gone in a Flash a little bit more, this card feels incredibly powerful, and I think a lot of your power turns are going to revolve around either this or Lightning Valley, but this card slaps. So, basically it's a 0 for 8 if you find a way to cheat it back to your hand. So the most easy play line here is going to be Gone in a Flash with go again. So either you snap it or, quicken, embodiment, you get the idea. And then in your link step, so when your go again resolves and you regain priority, before the link, completely closes, you do have a window to play these instants. So you can play something like Somersault and target it and bounce it back to your hand. This one's probably the worst option in my opinion because, it's redundant. You're already doing it, but you can do it if you need to. I think the most powerful one for me is Discharge. So you're going to play Gone in a Flash with go again. Link step, play Discharge. So then the Gone in a Flash goes back to your hand, right, when the Discharge is played. And then you get to replay your Gone in a Flash with the Discharge buff. So then it's 0 for 7. So let's say you have Gone in a Flash. Let's say no setup. You just snap it, right? 2-card hand, Gone in a Flash, Discharge. And that's also why we're playing stuff like Blink. And also why we're playing something like Current Funnel. You can find ways to cheat action points and just make sure that this card can be replayed multiple times in a turn. Current Funnel is less impactful with it, but obviously something like Blink is very good, right? Because you could just play it and then just blink it, goes back to hand, you replay it, right? 2-card 8, less exciting, but obviously The flexibility of this deck is the cool part. That's the main deck. Sideboard, of course, is very early development. We have Blast to Oblivion to deal with Illusionist, essentially. We have Command and Conquer to deal with the aggro mirror and other decks that need to focus around their arsenal. Your 2 costs actually do slot in pretty well here, and I think it's the biggest consideration is whether or not we want more 2 costs in the deck. Currently, I don't know if the 2 costs are strong enough, because all the 2 costs I've looked at have been kind of lackluster, especially like with what we're working with for the pool. But the fact that outside of using her ability, you're going to have 2 resources floating after using Starfall means that 2 costs do actually have a role in the deck. We have Electrify also for the aggro mirror. This is just a really solid lightning card that works on your curve. It means you're probably trading off with Starfall, hopefully. Hopefully you only have 1 blue. But you can also tunic this as well, which is really powerful. It's a good arsenal setup. And then we have Exude Confidence. This is for more control style game plans, right? So this lets you get around decks that are packing like D-Reacts or Instants. This is also very good against Wizard, of course, because what happens is that if you start your turn with this and then let's say snap it, or you play it off Embodiment, as long as you don't close the chain, which this deck doesn't do, you just like turn off all your opponent's instants for the turn. So like if they're playing Kano and you think you're presenting lethal, and you play Exude, they have to make the gambit of going off immediately, or potentially like having to like block out or maybe die, right? So they have to make the choice up front, as long as you're not closing the chain. So this card is really good, and in a deck that cheats Go Again, and you actually can benefit from the fact that it affects the entire combat chain, the card's definitely worth playing. When it comes to our sideboard, we just have some Arcane Barrier pieces plus Spell Void 2 with Shock Tremors. The biggest thing I want to point out is Quill Hand's interaction with Arc Lightning. So when you pop the Quill Hands, it itself resolves Go Again, right? So it also deals 1. So it turns your Quill Hand into basically a 0-for-3 Arcane buff for your turn, which is really good if you're trying to push something like Lightning Valley. I've noticed a lot of people will try to block out the Lightning Valley turn, and I will say if you have something like that combination, it just gets too hard to actually deny the Valley from Lightning Valley. So there is definitely an argument to just move it straight up to the main board. I'll have to test more to see what I like. So hopefully this gave you a good starting point for what you want to do with the deck. The biggest thing for me here is just maximizing not needing to pitch to play cards. When you can just dump all 5 cards every turn, and when you're playing these really powerful generics like Coax and Snatch that are balanced around not having Go Again, and you can just give them Go Again every single time you have them, this deck becomes very explosive and pressures a lot of damage very quickly. It definitely feels like probably one of the premier aggro decks right now. Time will tell if it's stronger than, you know, decks like Dash.io or even the Ninjas. Although with the Zen nerf, I do imagine that this deck would probably be a little bit better for that kind of game plan. But you know, there's lots of aggro decks out there, so we'll have to see how this compares to the other ones. The biggest caveat I'll give with this deck is I think Gone in a Flash has some really broken potential, and I would not be surprised to see an Aurora deck that focuses more around a ratio of instants to always make Gone in a Flash a power turn. Gone in a Flash has been really powerful, right, for me, but sometimes it is just a 0-for-4 that I just play somewhere along my turn. Would not be surprised to see a deck that makes that card always pop off. Although Gone in a Flash blocking 3, you know, makes it perfectly fine in a build like this, even if you're not going to, you know, get lucky and be able to cheat it out like 2, even maybe 3 times. So that's a deck. Give it a shot. Let me know what you think. Obviously, we are really early in development here, so always happy to hear feedback on what other people are trying out and what's working for them. But until next time, thank you for watching.